The second Sunday of Advent is traditionally celebrated as Peace Sunday, a day to remember the way God has promised us a different way to live with others, a way in which conflict is no more, war is no more, and all life is respected and cherished. What a time it is to be celebrating peace. There are so many wars and conflicts all over the globe, genocides happening while people stand by and watch. Even around Bethlehem, where Jesus is said to be born and is in present-day West Bank, Palestine. And the people there are under constant threat of violence from an empire. Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, a Palestinian pastor to a congregation in Bethlehem, had this to say on peace in Palestine this past October. What politicians are selling to the world is not peace, it is submission. It is the illusion of peace. It is a coercive peace where the powerful impose their will, dictate terms, and call it stability. There is no mention of justice, no acknowledgement of war crimes, and no talk of reparations or accountability. The message is clear: might makes right, the powerful rule, and the rest of us must accept. It feels like we are currently living in the opposite of endless peace. The yoke of our burdens and the bar across our shoulders seem really strong these days. It is hard to believe that peace is possible in our world. The news feeds us negativity, and new bad things seem to spring up in our country all the time, not to mention the rest of the globe. The end. Amen. We are doomed and things are never going to get better. That's the answer that seems easier some of the time, or frankly, most of the time. But my hope is that through this worship service today, we can revive our collective belief in the possibility of peace. The passage we read for today represents the promise of peace to God's people. The author describes how a people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. The state of being was profoundly negative, but the people have become happy and full of joy, as if it were the harvest. The yoke of their burden and the rod of their oppression has ended, and all the boots of the trampling warriors and the garments rolled in blood were burned as fuel for the fire. This is what I really long for and pray for every day. This is the promise God gives to us about what life could look like with other people. That then begs the question of how? And what makes that possible? It is because a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This verse for Christians has become synonymous with Advent and the birth of Jesus. When I hear this verse, the first thing I think of is Jesus, and that is probably true for all of you as well. And yet, the mystery of it is that when it was written, it was hundreds of years before Jesus' birth in Bethlehem. And as far as we can tell, the original author didn't have Jesus in mind at all. When Isaiah was alive, Israel was in conflict with the Assyrian Empire. There was social and economic instability, and the people started to wonder if God was showing up in their lives at all. Peace felt like a far-fetched idea, something that was not possible for them. This was especially true during the reign of King Asa, who was not a particularly good king. Isaiah believed that Asa's failures were contributing to Israel's problems. But he had hope that things could change because Asa had a son whose name was Hezekiah. Now, Hezekiah is likely the child the author of Isaiah had in mind when this passage was written. Now, this passage being about Hezekiah was a little hard for me to wrap my head around at first, because I always imagined this to just be about Jesus, particularly the section he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. How could Hezekiah, a mere child, be given those names? Well, to me, now, knowing what I know, this is a function of our English translations of the Bible, our general inability to read and understand biblical Hebrew, and our separation from the original context. This section is likely a list of royal titles. It isn't saying that Hezekiah is a mighty God, but more like he will be a representative of a mighty God. His life won't be everlasting, but his family line will. In fact, in the very beginning of Matthew, included in the family lineage connecting Abraham to Jesus, included is Hezekiah. And this passage is a prophecy of hope for the future. Hope that Hezekiah's kingship will be different than his father's and bring the kind of lasting peace that God's peoples had longed for. And as it turns out, the prophecy did mostly come true. Hezekiah did grow up and become the king, and a much better king than his father was. Even though critical scholarship suggests the writer of Isaiah had a specific earthly king in mind while writing this, most of us hear this passage and immediately think of Jesus. And that's not just because this passage has featured so prominently in Christian carols and other Advent things. I think this verse demonstrates what we believe Jesus' whole life and ministry has done and will do in our lives. Jesus is the completion of the titles given to this child. He is the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Through parables like the Good Samaritan, Jesus imparts valuable wisdom to us as our Wonderful Counselor, teaching us that we must care for and love all people, even those whom the world deems to be different from us. He used his power as mighty God, crossing major social boundaries to heal people with diseases like leprosy or paralysis. As everlasting Father, he created a new family, telling his disciples in Matthew chapter 12 that whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. And he promised to be our Prince of Peace in John chapter 14, when he told his followers, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world does. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." So given all that, it only makes sense for us to see Jesus in our passage today. What it then asks us to do is entertain what it means for us to believe that Jesus fulfills this for us today. This includes earnestly thinking about the fact that Jesus, too, was a child. Jesus did not come to us as a grown person. He was birthed by Mary into this world as a newborn child. Children, well, they can be fiery, they absolutely do need help from other people. Jesus needed so much from his parents, like every other child, and so did the king from Isaiah. Yet peace was with him, peace was in him, and peace came from him. Jesus, the incarnation of peace, was born as a child, and children are vulnerable, fragile, and must be nurtured to become who and what they are. Jesus was nurtured, cared for, and protected by his community. For example, in the Gospel of Matthew, we get the story of how Mary and Joseph go with Jesus to Egypt to save him from the danger King Herod posed to him. And so peace must be nurtured in the same way that a child must be. Peace flourishes when there are people who are committed to loving it, nurturing it, and protecting it actively. This nurture, care, and protection is a form of waiting. We are actively waiting for what we are nurturing, caring, and protecting to come to fruition. For us today, during this Advent season, this could be a lot of things. This could be devoting energy to a difficult relationship, or speaking up when we hear someone say something that denigrates or dishonors another person. We are called to engage and connect with peace and perhaps the absence of it close to us and far away. To connect with this peace, this Advent season, is to hold on to belief, to hold on to God's promise for peace and a better life. Because, friends, peace is possible. Jesus will be born for us, and Jesus was born for us. He is the Prince of Peace, and it was said he would bring us endless peace with justice and righteousness, not submission and stability. Yet we are also called to be a part of that peace by actively waiting, nurturing, caring, and protecting peace as it grows in our midst. And the promise of Advent is that war and violence cannot and will not consume us, even as we wait. We bring joy and exult in the goodness of God coming to us as our Prince of Peace. As we leave this place today, we will still be waiting. We will wait for Jesus' birth, but we will do so actively. We will wait for peace, but we will do so actively. Because, friends, when people stop believing in peace, it will never happen. Amen.